Help support AMTV by becoming a patron, an AMTV staff member, and following us over on Twitter. Channel 4 recently showcased its brand new look, hot off the heels from its 40th anniversary. After several years of the jolly metal giant delighting viewers up and down the country, he bid us one final farewell, as the new idents were due to take hold. A powerful minifilm was shown to present these new sequences, all with the theme of the 4 logo being some kind of traveller, occupying different places with different people across the UK, aiming to showcase all walks of life, an ethos that Channel 4 has always tried to embody and represent. So with these new idents, they seem to be organised into groups of 5, forever looping through each scenario, so that's how we'll be tackling them today. Let's begin with the first of these groups, which is titled as Identity. The first one we see is set in a corner shop, which has been deliciously animated. It may just be me, but it gives me major vibes of the shop seen in the new Spider-Verse movie in terms of style and look. Everything in the shop is extremely vibrant and colourful, no more so than the Channel 4 logo. If you look closely, you'll notice it's made up from crisp boxes, canned drinks, and so on, and interestingly, displayed in its classic 1980s colours. Not only is this a great nod to the broadcaster's past, but it absolutely works with the setting we're given. I also love the little details you can spot if you look hard enough. Like on the crisp box just before we move on to the next sequence, we can see that the brand is titled as McCoy's, a fun play on McCoy's, and that flavour is pickled pigeon? I don't even want to imagine what that tastes like. Great animation, great realistic setting, and a fab way to kick things off. The second sequence is the exact opposite. The animation has been swapped out for live action, and we see 2 people holding each other in apparent sorrow. We don't get to see what's prompted their sadness and embrace of each other. Could it be what's outside, or perhaps something on the television, as we can briefly see a light reflected from their faces? In one sense, the ambiguity does work, it makes you sit up and take notice. However, personally, I would have preferred a little more context into what's prompted these reactions. Some would say they make the ident more difficult to watch, but I'd argue if the aim is to showcase all manners of life within the UK, why not grief? Granted, the sadness here is apparent and it works to capture the attention, but I feel I'd like a little bit more. The third sequence within Identity does away with any human characters whatsoever, at least in vision. We see the 4 logo being the target for various kitchen appliances. Plates, wine glasses, pans, nothing spared here. The organ-type music surprisingly works really well with the visuals, giving a sense of chaos as to what we see. Once again, it's not clear just who or what is hurling these projectiles at the poor 4 logo, but seeing them make their impact in a slightly slowed-down fashion is rather engaging to the viewing eye. You could interpret it to represent the potential madness that happens within some households, particularly regarding when it comes to cooking dinner. I fully appreciate that's a stretch of an interpretation on my part, but a good ident can always prompt the viewer's imagination. The fourth sequence goes back to showcasing different people, with a group sitting at home doing a manner of different activities. We see 2 cooking up something under roaring flames, others watch on and recite what I'm guessing is some sort of prayer, whilst a woman quietly reads. Forgive my ignorance, I'm not sure what religion or group this is portraying, but I am curious to learn more, so anyone who can enlighten me in the comments down below, that would be very much appreciated. But this is where the main concept of the Ident rebrand arguably comes into its own. The idea of showing different people, different cultures, a chance to show viewers who aren't as accustomed as myself to a different way of living. It certainly piqued my interest, that's for sure, and hopefully has done the same for many different viewers up and down the country. The fifth and final sequence from the Identity batch gives us something completely different yet again. This time, we seem to be hovering over a city, the cars and people going about their day below. As we zoom closer, we can see that some citizens have been enclosed by a series of red or blue rectangles, almost as if they'd been selected. What's great is that these selected folk in red help make up the Channel 4 logo here, creating an interesting blend of objects. The whole sequence gives me the vibe of some kind of big surveillance operation. showing that whilst the technology we can and has advanced our lives in so many ways, it can also be used to keep an eye on us and the environments that we traverse. The soundscape further strengthens that idea for me, with a series of noises that sound like the processing of data streams, an all too common part of our day-to-day lives. To summarise, Identity is a great way to introduce viewers to Channel 4's new idents. The looping scenarios all enter and exit seamlessly, thanks in part to the brilliant camera work and direction, and no two sequences here feel like they are copies of each other. In each of the 5 we get different people, different places, and even different visual styles, the opening one at the corner shop being a key standout for me. Let's see if the strong start can be followed up by our next batch of 5, which are under the umbrella of the land. The first sequence seems to take place in some kind of forest. The night is coming in fast, and we see the glow of the 4 logo standing out excellently against patches of the land that are illuminated in some kind of enticing red glow. We see 3 women stand around the 4, which I won't lie did make me think that some kind of ritual was about to be performed, but alas, no such ritual occurs. One aspect that ties this all together is the music. The serene sounds of nature are so soothing and perfectly put me in the mood to watch whatever upcoming programme is about to begin. For me, the visuals are some of the strongest in the whole new look for Channel 4, but that doesn't mean we don't have some lovely looking idents coming up. The second sequence here is one such example, a very simple premise being that the 4 is out at sea, the waves crashing against it on a dark and stormy night, showing the majesty and the power of the Earth's mighty water. I love the contrast of going from the red hues of the forest to the darker tones of the ocean at night, and just like with that first ident, the soundscape of merely waves smashing against the 4 logo works an absolute treat. My only nitpick here, and you may hear this pop up a few times, is that I wish we had been able to linger on some of these sequences for much longer than we actually do. Even if the camera had just been moving a little more slowly, that I believe would have enhanced the impact that this sequence can have on a viewer. And if you're watching this on a 4K telly, then boy do I envy you. Away from the waves, we enter the third ident of the land. Now, this one seems to break away from merely showing us the landscapes nature can offer, and instead something a bit more abstract. We see someone observing an industrial fan heater, which is clearly labelled in case you had any doubts as to what it is. Using its power, we can see that it is effortlessly lifting the Earth, albeit a scaled down version of the planet. The concept for this one is cute, if not a little disorientating, if you ask me. It still represents the land, I mean the entire land, as in the Earth is shown here, so that makes sense. But the camera starts on the Earth before quickly showing us the fan heater, and then on to the next one. It's an example of the limited time we spend on each sequence, arguably hampering what we're presented with. Also, unless I missed it, this is an example where the Channel 4 logo itself isn't seen, which comes across as a little bit jarring since it's been so predominant in many of the idents we've looked at so far. So whilst the concept is amusing, this is one of the least effective of the new Channel 4 idents for me. The penultimate sequence for the land, on the other hand, is a little gem. In the darkness of night, we see a special camera capture a lone fox roaming around, discovering an old phone box, left to grow foliage and be encompassed by nature. The visual aesthetics of this one are fantastic. The black and white look of the nighttime setting pops so well, and the Channel 4 logo itself stands out as well, despite it being only presented in monochrome. I like the fact that musically, there is no soundtrack for this one, just the sounds of the scene, the fox trampling around, presumably looking for some food. I know I often harp on about idents not having a soundtrack or music, but in some cases like this, it can really work a treat. I also love how, once again, the concept is one that is realistic to what we experience here in the UK. Old structures like phone boxes are just left to decay and have nature take over, with animals roaming in and out of them seamlessly, whilst they're also adorned with graffiti and other such markings. Arguably my favourite sequence from the land batch. There is one more ident in this section, however, taking place at a beach, with a distinctly retro feel. As we enter, the camera adopts a filter akin to that of a 1980s VHS camera, complete with timecode. This instantly conjures up that feeling of old family holiday videos, ones with a grainier picture, capturing the most mundane yet special parts of life. Those with a knowledge of TV history may recognise the significance of the date, for the 2nd of November 1982 was indeed the day that Channel 4 first began broadcasting on the UK airwaves. The concept works a charm, as we see a boy and their father enjoying a day out in the sun, the child gleefully trying to catch the camera as it zooms on by. I like what they were going for here, but there are a few things I would have loved. First off, why not have the Channel 4 logo presented in its 1982 colours? That could have really pushed that classic feel. Furthermore, whilst the VHS effect does work, it's a shame that they couldn't have taken it one step further. Imagine if this had been shot on videotape and shown that way, as would have been done 40 years ago. Though I guess they didn't do that because that kind of image on modern day HD tellies, yeah, that might not have been so good. In summary, the land is another strong section of this Channel 4 rebrand, though rather than be equal, some sequences are stronger than others. The ones set within the land itself, within nature, like the forest or the one at sea, to me that really comes across as powerful and striking, and even the simpler ones like the fox roaming, that contains power in a different respect. All of them though, with the possible exception of the fan heater, do a good job at saying, this is the land we live on, and we're going to show you its different aspects, and quite simply, the beauty of it. But now we push onwards to our third section of this new era for Channel 4, with 5 new sequences positioned under the title of System. The first of these idents shows a model railway set, and if you didn't know beforehand, railways are a big deal in the UK, in some form or another. We see the locomotives dart about the track, whilst atop a hill, we see the Channel 4 logo, in its 1980s colours. It's always great to see the iconic symbol return to its multicoloured glory that it launched with all that time ago, but then that just begs the question, why was this the sequence for it to get that treatment, and not the one before that made a distinct reference back to the 1980s? Baffling choices aside, I like the simplicity of this one. Model railways are always a delight to sit back and watch in action, and in some ways, you could argue it represents the system of our rail network, and when at optimum, how well it works in getting us from A to B. One thing I don't like are these guys. What are they doing? Men in suits standing ominously watching on as these trains go by? Not sure what's happening here, but no thank you. The second sequence of the batch takes us into a rather pink bedroom, where we see a woman walking about before sitting down and checking her phone. Now, you may think, what relevance to system does this have? Well, I suppose you could argue that for any of us to go walking around our bedroom before settling down to check our phones has simply become a part of our daily lives. That aside, I like the focus on the colour pink. Pink itself is a great colour, I don't care what anyone says, and with the Barbie movie coming up soon, the colour is hotter than ever. I also like the detail that you can find if you pause and just look around the room. It's a truly lived-in bedroom, and even the Channel 4 logo has been incorporated well. From not just being in pink, but for being used to hang clothes, place a cup of tea, it just helps it blend in, yet stand out that much more. So this may be an odd choice for some, but on the wider scale of Channel 4 aiming to showcase ourselves through idents, this is one I know that many will be able to relate to. Our third sequence, perhaps, is more evident of a system at work. We are taken to some kind of warehouse setting, with several stacks of boxes moving around, heading towards their intended storage place or destination. Once again, the integration of the 4 logo here is seamless, being made up of several cardboard boxes, standing out effortlessly on the steely grey floor. Oddly, it seems that the moving stacks are driverless, moving about completely on their own. It's not too jarring, but if this is happening in real warehouses, I think some questions need to be asked. I don't have too much more to say on this one. It's a straightforward concept with a recognisable setting. You know where you are, what this is going for within a matter of seconds. I personally would have liked to have seen some human workers involved in this somehow, as they're still a big and often undervalued part of our warehouse operatives. So, whilst not the most exciting ident, it does work nonetheless. The fourth sequence of systems kind of addresses the elephant in the room. You see what I did there? But no, quite literally, this sequence is dominated by this rather lovely elephant, who stands about the table, surrounded by very concerned and anxious looking people. From what I can see, I would assume this is some kind of board meeting, the people watching a presentation that is causing them some great worry, leading to think, who will be the one to address the elephant in the room? To start with, this is a fab play on phrases, and it's presented in this utterly ridiculous but nevertheless amusing fashion. Once again, we have a sequence where the iconic 4 logo isn't visible, and whereas before with the fan heater I cited that as a downside, I don't necessarily mind it here. Given that the premise is so amusing, it kind of makes you forget about the 4 logo. It's not the best ident ever, but addressing the elephant in the room is something that again is so common in our day-to-day lives here in the UK, wondering who will be the one to make that crucial move. The final sequence as part of systems is an interesting one to observe, as I would argue you could interpret it to be representing a whole variety of different things. At first glance, I thought this was some kind of university setting, with a bunch of students gathered around to chill and relax. The more I watched it, the more I began to think differently. At one point, I thought this was a group of actors getting together to rehearse a play, given some of the elaborate costumes we see and the chairs lined up behind them. However, you could also think some sort of ceremony is about to take place. In any case, I do like an ident that sparks you to think about what it could be. Having said that, part of me feels like this sequence's concept and intentions could have been made a little more clear. I'm glad once again at the variety of people that we see dotted about, truly representative of how diverse the UK can be, but I wish the purpose of the setting and what they're all doing here is made a bit more obvious. Perhaps with more time allocated that could have become clear, but as is, we can leave it up to the imagination. Or if you find a direct source claiming what it is, then you can let me know in the comments. The systems batch, in summary, is strong, but much more of a mixed bag for me than the previous 2 sections. Whilst we have more obvious system metaphors such as the railway and the warehouse idents, some are left a lot more ambiguous. Some are showcasing the more mundane aspects of daily life, which I appreciate as I'd find that more relatable, and also a splash of the absurd and ridiculous, albeit cleverly done. I just hope as we continue that the theming of these idents don't become more and more loose and less cohesive. Let's find out then, as we delve into our 4th batch of sequences today, titled as Release. The first sequence here is definitely one of the most abstract. We see a person in what looks to be a motion capture suit, becoming quickly immersed in a digital world, one in which he seemingly evaporates and becomes part of the wisps flowing about the distinctive green Channel 4 logo. Or at least, he doesn't evaporate, as when we zoom closer, we can still see the outline of this person. That outburst was more accurately a release of energy to be encompassed into this picture. It's rather striking, and because it all happens so quick, it can take you by surprise. Had this ident been allowed a bit more time to clearly show us this release in action, I think this could have been nothing short of truly breathtaking. It's still definitely impressive from a visual standpoint for sure, but sadly another victim of what I believe to be too short of a runtime. The second sequence is probably the most shocking, yet important of this Channel 4 rebrand. Amidst the night sky, we see the 4 logo encompassed in flames. We see a group of people challenging the camera before sprinting off. Now, when first viewing this, I bet you never thought you'd see a scene like this be presented as a mere TV ident. But this arguably, more than any other sequence, demonstrates Channel 4's willingness to show as many aspects of UK life as possible, even the more drastic ones. You could interpret this scene as many things. The outbreak of a riot, the result of violence between, say, different factions or gangs, I could go on. But ultimately, the release within this ident is that of anger, of violence. That sense of so many feelings and emotions being pent up that they materialise and manifest in the most extreme forms. To see the Channel 4 logo burning and smouldering away is quite horrifying, but the messaging here is clear, that these kind of outbreaks and outbursts can and do happen in this country, and if anything, the last response that we should give is to ignore them. The third sequence is a bit more jovial. Our setting is the nightlife. Tons of people outside clubs or takeaways, perhaps waiting for their taxi home, or just some greasy food to try and sober up or stave off a hangover. Even though these people are frozen, you see many aspects of UK nightlife. Lads ribbing and grappling with each other, bouncers having words with some patrons, ladies helping each other whack their heels off after several hours of uncomfortable dancing. The attention to details here are great if you slow down or pause the ident, and again, absolutely meets the rebrand's remit of showcasing the UK in all of its forms. The release theme is present, that release of going out after a long week, letting go, enjoying yourself, perhaps getting a little too drunk. All of that is encapsulated brilliantly in a rather short time frame. Definitely one of the most relatable and most effective sequences. The penultimate ident of this batch, well, I'm not really sure what it is. It's presented in monochrome and does have some smatterings of information towards the bottom right of the screen, but that doesn't mean I'm any the wiser as to what's going on. I'm sure some of you will be able to enlighten me down in the comments, but I'd argue if the premise or concept of your ident isn't recognisable quickly to the vast majority of viewers, then we have ourselves a little problem. The 4 logo seems to be in the midst of some kind of living organism, as we can see the various strands pulsing, as they also enwrap the logo itself. But for me, this has to be one of the weakest of the 25 new idents we've been given by Channel 4. I'm sure there's a strong case for it, but if I can't clearly identify what it is, then I'd argue that it hasn't done its job in the most effective way. The final sequence, on the other hand, is one that I can identify and relate with and understand. You couldn't be presented with a simpler premise. A couple lying in bed happily, being content with each other's company. And that in itself is release. That realization that lying with the one you love is one of the greatest releases of all. I like how this ident doesn't try to overcomplicate things, it doesn't add subsequent layers that don't need to be there, it just shows you the concept as bare bones as it can, and it communicates effectively the messaging and that theme of release. There's not much more I can or need to say with this one. Its simpleness is effective to a T, and it may even be an underrated gem, in my view. The release section of the Channel 4 rebrand is arguably the most effective one of the bunch so far. In each of the 5 sequences, yes, even this one, that idea of release is shown in a manner of different ways. Not to mention that some of them showcase the darker, or more rough around the edges sides of the UK, and what goes on within it. And more power to the creative team and Channel 4 for pushing ahead with that idea. The notion that we don't always have to act like we're perfect in this country, because the reality is, we are often far from it. Well, that leaves us with just 5 more sequences to look at, and all of which are tied under the theme of love. In the very first sequence, where we see outside a house in the pouring rain, 2 women share a tender moment. This is arguably one of the most common and most recognisable and relatable aspects of love. 2 people sharing a kiss or a hug before heading home, whatever the weather. Similar to the couple in bed during the release section, I like how simple this ident is put across to us. Nothing more complex needs to happen, just showing these 2 in love is more than enough to leave a positive impact. Props to Channel 4 for not going down the often overdone route of just showing a man and a woman either. A good showcase and reminder that love is love and transcends all other boundaries. The second sequence made me feel instantly nostalgic, as it takes place on the last day of school. We see a bunch of kids going round, chatting with friends, saying their goodbyes before they head on to pastures new, embracing the tradition of signing each other's shirts with a whole manner of brightly coloured messages and well wishes. I like how the 4 logo is involved also, as you can see that it is too adorned in these messages. Not only is this sequence going to be nostalgic for many who watch, I love how a quirky tradition of British schools has been translated so well into ident form. I too did this back in the day, and I remember going round trying to get as many signatures for my shirt as possible, and I still remember the joy, nervousness, but overall excitement of heading on to a new school. This is undoubtedly one of my favourite idents from the rebrand, partly for nostalgia, sure, but also for capturing that innocent time of life, where everyone is just happy and ready for the next big challenge. A great choice by the creative team, and absolutely a fab showcase of love. The third sequence gives us the complete 180. We see that the setting is at a cemetery, with graves adorning the lush green field. Whilst the 4 logo is present, it doesn't take too much attention away from the detail behind it. We can see a ton of flowers lay the ground, with the words beloved spelt in the back. This definitely holds a gut punch to it. We often forget that whilst we love in the present, we also hold love for those who are no longer with us. A love that, whilst maybe tainted by grief or sorrow, remains just as prevalent and strong as it ever did when they were alive. I have to commend Channel 4 again for not being afraid to show the darker or sadder sides of life within their idents. Death is just another natural part of life, and if life is what they want to showcase in their sequences, then to ignore this aspect would be doing it all a disservice. It's simply shot, beautifully placed, and ultimately communicates the message of love, a reminder that we should not lose it, even if those we hold dear have passed on. The penultimate ident of the love batch I find really charming. We see a group of children observing a bunch of butterflies behind glass panels, and whilst this may seem relatively simple and not outwardly showcase a feeling of love, I believe it is still present. As children, when we're discovering literally everything for the first time, including different living species, there is a love present. Not necessarily an attachment, but in the sense that we love the discovery. We love learning, we love seeking out new things to observe and be fascinated by. That's what I interpret this ident to represent, the childlike wonderment we feel as we grow up, the love of discovery. I don't have much more to add, except that I love the discovery aspect, and hope that future generations don't lose that love of discovery as we progress through the years. Now, the final ident of the love package, and the rebrand as a whole, is an interesting head-scratcher. As you can see, the concept is nothing more than a pane of glass shattering over the 4 logo, before the rest of this red box begins to fall apart. You may ask, well, what's the love theme? Well, the visual cue is one thing, the colour red commonly being associated with love, but here's my interpretation. The takes on love we've seen so far have all been rooted in positivity. Even the funeral setting, which is sadder, yes, I would argue that still communicates that we should continue to love with a fondness as opposed to a sadness. However, I truly believe this ident is showcasing the fragility of love, the showcase of a heart breaking apart, the shattering glass and cracked walls demonstrating how it can all fall apart and happen so quickly. This sadly is a fate that many a relationship encounters, that awful feeling of a love that was once so full, being contorted and broken apart into several different fragments. The sound of a heartbeat in the background further reinforces this idea, and if that is indeed what they were going for, props to them. I think showing a negative side to love again demonstrates the willing that Channel 4 has for showing all aspects of life, be they good or bad. And with such a poignant stance, this ident is the perfect way to summarise both this batch and round off the rebrand as a whole. The love section, similar to Release, has a cohesive theme that is present throughout the 5 sequences. With love being such a recognisable emotion, I wouldn't be surprised if some of these idents become some of the most revered by viewers. Their relatability is crystal clear, from the last day of school, to saying goodbye to a loved one, to finding and sharing love outside your front doorstep. All of these things happen to millions of people, not just in the UK, but around the world. Even abstract kinds of love, like discovery or the difficult sides of love, such as heartbreak, are great inclusions, and truly emphasise the remit that this rebrand encapsulates very well indeed. Overall, the 2023 ident package for Channel 4 is nothing short of stunning. During a time where many TV channels view their idents as some kind of unnecessary afterthought, it's fantastic that one of the main UK broadcasters, such as Channel 4, is willing and able to give us something truly memorable. The sheer variety alone at launch is something to find awe-inspiring. To come up with 25 unique sequences, all brilliantly linked with the looping, travelling concept, works together in the most seamless fashion. Whether that's showing you the systems of the country, the land that we live on, our identity as a nation, the releases that we can have, and the love that we can share. And in terms of its messaging, the idea of showcasing all kinds of aspects of the UK and its culture, I think for the most part, it's absolutely succeeded in that aim. And I only hope that as the years roll on, that Channel 4 is able to expand and add to this lineup of beautifully shot, well-crafted idents. Thank you all so much for watching this episode of the Ident Review. If you enjoyed it, please remember to like the video, subscribe to us here at AMTV, and let me know your thoughts on the idents we've looked at in the comments down below. Until the next time, see you later! Thank you to our patrons for helping to support the show, and a special thank you to Macra, Hooks Media, Ben Freeman, Ethan Carberry-Holt, Bruce Danton, Globe of Reviews, Derek Chambers, Sean Knock, Dord Khan, Traffy, Liam Domain, and Keith Myers, our AMTV staff members.